Hello everyone, welcome back to On The Fly. Today we're going to be projecting the team that's going to be representing Sweden at the 2025 Four Nations Faceoff. So before we get too far into it today, these rosters will be going live at 2 o'clock tomorrow. That is Wednesday, December the 4th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time for Finland and Sweden. We did already do our projection video for Finland. That can be found in the description below. As well, we're going to have at 6:30 is USA and Canada. At 7 o'clock Eastern Time tomorrow, December the 4th. We are going to be having a live stream here on the channel breaking down all of the official teams. So be sure to tune into that one. It's going to be a good one. You can find a link to that in the description below. But with that, move on to this team here with Sweden. This is a team that, in my opinion, is going to be a real dark horse candidate to win it all this year. Obviously, a team that's struggled a little bit on that international stage. They have had their moments, but also they've had their weaknesses. And this is a team, I think, that's going to be able to have that dark horse mentality and really take a lot of teams by surprise here. You know, Canada and the U.S. think it's them against them, right? Canada thinks they're going to have to beat the U.S. to win it. The U.S. thinks they have to beat Canada. For Sweden, they don't really have that many expectations, aside to maybe beat Finland, which I think every team at the tournament expects them to do. But at the same time, I think Sweden's a team here that actually has a shot to win it all. And this is one of those underrated teams that I think you'll see here in a second, sort of why. And we'll start here with the 6 players that were selected back in June. These are the players that are already on the team as part of the early selection. So that is Filip Forsberg, William Nylander, Mika Zibanejad for the forwards. On the defense, you have Victor Hedman, Gustav Forsling, and Erik Karlsson. So those are the 6 players already on the team. And now to the projections. So for the forwards, you have Jesper Bratt, Elias Lindholm, William Karlsson, Elias Pettersson, Adrian Kempe, Lucas Raymond, Joel Eriksson Ek, Mikael Backlund, Fabian Zetterlund, and William Eklund. So for these, you know, obviously there's 2 players there at the bottom. And for me, you know, you sort of look at the roster, sort of that first 5 or 6 are basically locks. I may even include Eriksson Ek in that lock. And then the bottom 3 are sort of toss-ups. And I think for me, Backlund makes sense, you know, given his experience, given the two-way game. I think for me, that's what you kind of want to see, especially out of the Swedes, because if you're going to try and play offense and offense, it's not really going to work. And this team, at least Sweden, is very built around their defensive structure. So we'll see if they're able to really play that full defensive game, especially when you look at who they're going to be playing. You're going to have to win in tight checking games, and I don't really see the potential to go up against, say, Canada or US on mano-a-mano, scoring on scoring. You know, the unfortunate part is those 2 teams, Canada and the US, just have too much firepower, where, you know, if you're playing a team, say, like a Finland, you might be able to get away with it a little bit more, but you have to play a full structured game. You have to make sure you're taking care of both ends. For me, that's where Backlund really comes in. Zetterlund and Eklund, I think you sort of try and get that chemistry together. One of the guys who I left off this list that I think really could very likely be on this roster is a guy like Gustav Nyquist. He's a player who I very much see in there, but at the same time, you really never know. As well as Kevin Stunland. He's another guy from Utah. He's sort of that two-way game that I think he very well could have. But when you look at this team, you know, you have your sort of goal scorers with guys like Nylander and Zibanejad, and then you have sort of your defensive guys. And I think guys like Elias Lindholm is going to be a player, and also Mikael Backlund. I think that could very well be a line, those 2 players playing together, just because of their defensive-minded abilities. And I think for a team like Sweden, who isn't necessarily going mano-a-mano, you're going to want players that are going to fill certain roles. And I think that's where those players like a Backlund, like a Lindholm, are going to be really, really crucial to this team. And not to mention, obviously, you know, they're going to be able to provide that scoring touch too, but also the ability to play the full 200-foot game is going to be really key for this Swedish team. Other players, notable names left off the list is a guy like Rickard Rakell from Pittsburgh. You know, he sort of started a little bit slow this year. It's one of those tough guys to leave off the list. Trying to find spots for him just becomes tough. And for me, you know, I'll take a guy like Eklund over him, as well as Zetterlund. I think between those 2, you know, they've had really good years playing together in San Jose. So, you know, stick them together, see what happens. And hopefully for the Swedes, you know, they can find their chemistry on the international ice. It's obviously, you know, NHL size ice, but on the international in the international landscape, and hopefully find their way there. The other player left off this list was Leo Carlsson, and this is one, once again, sort of, you know, it's between him and Eklund. And I think for me, just based on what we've seen this year, I'm going to take Eklund, although very well could go the other way in the official results that we'll find out at 2 p.m. tomorrow. But at the end of the day, this forward group is very built around a full two-way game. Obviously, we'll talk about the defense here in a second, and boy, is that ever stacked. But their forwards, having guys that can play the full 200-foot game while also having the goal scorers. Because obviously, if you're going to play a full 200-foot game, at some point, you need to eventually put it in the other team's net, or otherwise it just doesn't work. That's the whole point of being a two-way. But there's ability for both teams to go both ways here. And for me, I think that's where this forward group is going to be really, really crucial. As for the defensemen, we have the three original, Hedman, Forsling, Karlsson. On top of that, I have Rasmus Andersson, Rasmus Dahlin, Matthias Ekholm, and Jonas Brodin, who I think these four players, I think the top three, Andersson, Dahlin, and Ekholm, definite locks for this team. Now, let's talk about Brodin for a second, because for me, I think one of the obvious glaring players in the background, as I see the flag sort of staring down behind me here, is where's Hampus Lindholm, right? He's a player that's, good enough to make this team, in my opinion. If he's healthy, and we'll get to that in a second, in my opinion, he's probably the fourth defenseman or maybe fifth defenseman on this list, behind maybe Dahlin and Forsling, Karlsson, Hedman. I think he's probably the fifth. But for me, why isn't he on that list? It's because he's hurt. And he's been out the last, I think it's 9 games, 12 games now and counting. And it doesn't look like he's getting better. He's still week to week. And for me, I think if you're a team like Sweden, you just want to get this thing finalized. You can change for injuries. So that's the one thing I will throw out there. So say, for example, if the Swedes do end up taking him, they can pick Lindholm and then, say a month and a half into the line, they realize, oh crap, he's not going to be on the team. Now we can take Lindholm. Now we can switch it up and eventually take Brodin, who I think it will be. One other name in there is Rasmus Sandin from Washington. I think he could be in there. But at the end of the day, I think Lindholm is obviously the player that they'd want. But Brodin is still a very solid contender behind it. And I think when you look at this defensive core, even with Hampus Lindholm out, you still have a pretty good say in it. So as far as the defense line goes, still pretty solid. No real complaints there. Probably one of the best we'll see at this tournament. And now we'll move on to the goalies. And this is one that I think is going to be one that's very up in the air right to the very end. So for me, taking Jacob Markstrom, Linus Ullmark, and Fredrik Gustafsson for the third goalie here. I think, we can pretty safely assume that Jacob Markstrom is going to be the starter. Linus Ullmark is likely going to be the starter B. Could be either goalie to play. And then I think that third spot, I think, is definitely up for grabs. Gustafsson versus, say, a guy like Anton Forsberg or Samuel Ersson. All those guys are kind of in that range of who could very well be in that goaltending crease as that third goalie. But I think at the end of the day, it's just going to come down to which player do the Swedes actually want to use, who's hot at the right time. And for me, that's Gustafsson right now. It's the one problem with selecting teams 2 months out before the thing starts, is it's very difficult to say, yeah, we're going to take this guy because he's going to be hot in 2 months. Versus, say, the juniors, where you select your team in another, I think it's 2 weeks basically a week before the thing starts. 2 weeks before the thing starts, as we will have full coverage of that as well. So if you're an international hockey fan, be sure to subscribe here. But for the goaltenders, it could really be anyone here, and for that third spot. But I think when you look at it, it's between Markstrom and Ullmark eventually for that number one spot. The third goalie is who's to say I made the Four Nations team and basically just be that backup. But, of course, time will tell there. Lots to go. But if you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. If you'd like to drop a like, if you really like this, you're subscribing. Tell all your friends and comment down below your thoughts on Team Sweden. Until next time, see you.